we have to be just as vigilant in terms of accountability, answerability, responsibility when it comes to Biden and Harris, when it comes to the administration of the establishment of the Democratic Party, because we know it's tied to Wall Street. We know it's tied to militarism. We know that it doesn't want to hit mass incarceration. We know it doesn't want to hit the situation, the plight and predicament of working people, so that Wall Street is still very much in the driver's seat of the Democratic Party, just as it was very much in the driver's seat of the Republican Party. We're looking for what do ordinary people, everyday people, working people of all colors, all genders, all sexual orientation, all regions, what will we have? And that's the fundamental question, brother. And that's what you have been highlighting year after year after year. And I salute you for it, man. I really do. It just means, you're going to be misconstrued, misunderstood, attacked, character assassination, and so forth. I mean, I say join the club. They've been coming at me for decades after decades. You got a smile on your face. I got a smile on my face. Because when you're fighting for something bigger than just the next party election or the next position in the establishment, then you got a different kind of freedom, man. Different kind of freedom. America needs more free brothers and sisters of all colors. And it's often been the artists who've been the vanguard in that regard, the musicians and the comic artists. But we need free folk across the board if this democratic project is going to sustain itself, given the very ugly, not just neoliberal, but predatory capitalists and imperial foreign policy in place. I'm talking about that high, thick form of militarism that comes out of the Pentagon, and I don't care what color the head of the Pentagon is. We're talking about moral issues. For me, as a revolutionary Christian, we're talking about spiritual issues. Human beings being sacred, no matter what country, no matter what color, no matter what gender, sexual orientation they are.
You talk about being a revolutionary Christian. I've always wondered, why isn't every Christian a socialist?
Well, I tell you, most Christians don't want to follow Jesus into that temple and run out the money changers, brother. No, they're on Pontius Pilate's payroll, or they're paying homage to Pontius Pilate. You see, Jesus was crucified because he ran out the money changers. What was the temple? It was the largest edifice this side of Rome. It was a bank. They had police on the one side. For us, it has to do with Wall Street, White House, Pentagon, Hollywood, Harvard, Yale, University of Chicago, all of the elite institutions that accommodate themselves to an unjust status quo. Now, there's individuals inside of those institutions. Because, see, as a Christian, you always recognize every human being is made in the image of God, and therefore they can choose to go another way. You can be a member of the elite and choose to be in solidarity with everyday people. You can be a white brother and choose to be in solidarity with the Black freedom movement. I can be a male, straight. I choose to be in solidarity with my precious trans folk. Those are moral and spiritual choices people make. But generally speaking, the dominant tendency of an establishment when it comes to elite sites, Jesus understood that.
Yes.
They take advantage of the vulnerable. They exploit those who they can exploit, and then get mad when you try to make them accountable, as if it's your fault. You say, hey, we just pursuing the truth and seeking justice. Hey.
So that is what it's crazy. I never thought as a comedian, our whole thing is we've always ripped on politicians. They're like the punching bag. And first, all of a sudden right now, it's not allowed anymore. I'm getting all this hate and grief, not because I'm yelling at waitresses or bus drivers, but because I'm yelling at politicians, the most powerful people in the country, if not the world. In the middle of a crisis, I'm yelling. My hair is on fire, so I'm yelling like it is. And people think that's rude. People call you sexist, and you have rage-filled rants, and you're all this stuff. And who am I doing that? I'm at the people who are denying us health care. That's who I'm raging at. Is that wrong?
Exactly. No, brother. You remember that line 24a in Plato's Apology, when Plato writes about Socrates. He says, parrhesia, P-A-R-R-H-E-S-I-A, fearless speech, frank speech, unintimidated speech, plain speech, in the face of the powerful. He says, that's the cause of my unpopularity. Now, of course, Socrates was convicted for death,
yes,
condemned to death, and drank the hemlock. But Aristophanes is one of the great, creators of the comic genre, right? always cutting against the grain, critiques of war, critiques of patriarchal power, critiques of economic elites. That's the role of free people who engage in fearless speech, and often it is the artist, and often it's the comic artist. It's just the fact that, like Jonathan Swift, Mark Twain. Look at Mark Twain's critique of imperialism. Look at Mark Twain's critique of capitalism. He was the greatest comic writer in the history of the American empire, and we haven't got to Moms Mabley yet.
Right.
We haven't got to Moms Mabley yet. She was a great comic artist, and her critique was devastating. Even of the black bourgeoisie, Moms Mabley had a critique of, because she knew the black middle class could accommodate itself to establishments and not have the kind of compassion for poor black and poor working class as they moved into the upper echelons of the society. So it's just truth in generals like that, brother.
So how do you explain intellectuals and self-styled intellectuals who always talk about the working class and the poor, but who don't know how working people talk and what their daily struggles are or why they're angry? When will intellectuals stop talking about the working class in condescending ways that make leftist politics repulsive to them?
Well, I mean, part of it is a complicated issue. I mean, the problem is the United States is such an anti-intellectual culture. And so to opt to be an intellectual means you're going to be full of a lot of anxieties and even self-doubts of how you fit in. And so the question becomes then, in order to deal with those anxieties, a lot of intellectuals create little silos that reinforce an elitism, that reinforce an arrogance and a haughtiness and a condescension toward ordinary people. But that's a sign of their insecurity. That's a sign of their own anxiety.
Okay.
You see what I mean? If you're secure about yourself, you don't need to go around putting other folk down.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's true for white supremacists. That's true for male supremacists, right? You and I know. We tell the brothers, you don't need to put any sisters down if you're really secure about yourself. Give up your toxic masculinity if you're really secure about yourself. Well, so it is with intellectuals. Intellectuals create their little internal world to reinforce each other and therefore become tied into that context, and they'll become multi-contextual and connect with others and recognize, hey, there's a whole lot of wisdom outside of the academy.
Yes.
There's a whole lot of insight, whole lot of courage. Now, I've been blessed to teach in prisons for 37 years, so I'm reminded all the time. If I moved from Harvard to the prisons, I'm dealing with some magnificent human beings in both contexts. But one context is tied to the establishment and its dominant orientation, and the other context is dealing with the massive suffering of poverty and decrepit schools and indecent housing and not enough jobs with a living wage and not enough access to health care, which ought to be a fundamental right. And I'm not talking about the lip service of neoliberal Democratic Party folk. All of them talking about health care as a right. Do they really mean it? That becomes a challenge. But I'm trying to generate a little bit of sympathy for the intellectuals, because you see, in America, Americans love intelligence because it generates big cash. But we don't like intellect because intellect raises questions about the basic assumptions of a system. It doesn't just try to fit in the system. Intelligence is tied to success, making it in the system. Intellect, sitting back, raises issues about the system and says, wait a minute, there's an injustice here. There's a deep unfairness here. There's a willful ignorance here. There is a callousness here. There's an indifference here. And Rabbi Heschel taught us what? Indifference to evil is more evil than evil itself. Because indifference to evil creates a whole way of being, a whole way of looking at the world, so you actually don't ever get a chance to see the degree to which you are accommodating to a status quo. That's a different kind of thing. It reinforces the illusion that somehow you're such a force for good. No, we don't want simulacra. We don't want copies. We want the real thing. This is the Ashford Simpson moment. You remember Ashford Simpson? Yes. Nothing like the real thing. Give me something real.
Yeah. Ain't nothing like the real thing, baby. Ain't nothing like the real thing.
Talk to me. Oh, that's Tammy and Marvin.
Wow, that was fun. That brings me back. Hey everybody, this is the part where I tell you where all our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then this is where I tell you to join our premium program and get extra content, but nobody's got a fucking job. So just enjoy the video.